Hi, everybody. When you listen to this show, this is Dave Emmons and Strange Reality Show. Be syndicated probably through maybe a couple other networks, and those networks will probably be put in front of this show as it's advertised. But my guest today is Earl Grey Anderson, MUFON director, Southern California. Nice guy. We get to talking, and we we want to get the show started quicker, but we got to talking about a lot of interesting things. And I hope that Earl's got a good memory because he has talked about a lot of good stuff. But this show's going to be almost 2 hours. And like I said, you've seen me on Facebook a lot of times, and it'll be on Facebook, and it'll be on YouTube and Rumble and LinkedIn, all those types of shows, and also be syndicated. I said through maybe another network that'll probably be carrying the show, and so you'll find that out. I'll have it advertised in Facebook. Again, like I said, this is Dave Emmons and Strange Reality. My guest is Earl Grey Anderson, and he's MUFON State Director of Southern California, beautiful Southern California. I know we say a lot of bad stuff about California, but Southern California is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, Southern California, and he's an executive member of the MUFON's ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team, and that's a good team. I'm very interested in that, and hosted both Experiencer workshops at last year's MUFON Symposium in Denver, Colorado, and will host the same events at this year's MUFON Symposium in Ohio. So Earl's actually sought after pretty much. He's a pretty busy guy. Earl has personally investigated over 900 UFO reports and specializes in experiencer high strangeness cases. He has appeared on multiple radio shows, podcasts, and TV shows such as Unidentified with Demi Lovato and the Travel Channel Storming Area 51 special and the season finale of Motor Trend Television's Motor Mythbusters Cars versus UFOs. Earls was featured in 3 documentaries that were released this year, all produced by the award-winning independent filmmaker Jeremy Norrie. MUFON and UFOs, The Proof is Out There. That's a popular show. I've seen that quite a bit. The sequel one, I Want to Believe, and that's another type of show. 600,000 views on YouTube alone, and UFOs and Silver Screen. And I hope, Earl, that we get a lot of views on this for you, buddy.
Great.
You have a lot of knowledge. I admire that. Early recently presented MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team and shared it with his own experiences, anomalies, experience. He's had his own experiences, and we're going to be talking about that. The History Channel's most viewed show, Ancient Aliens, that's one of my favorites also. Earl was featured keynote speaker at Oregon's 2023 McMinium's UFO Fest.
McBinimans.
That's easy.
UFO Fest. There you
go. And sharing the stage with Travis Walton. I know that guy. Jennifer Stein, Seth Talk, and Cheryl and Linda Costa. I know those 2 people very well. Earl teaches an accredited course of ufology, UFOs, and other worlds at Los Angeles Otis College of Art and Design. And that's rare for somebody to teach UFOs in the colleges, but that's great. The native of California, Southern California, Earl is also known as a published singer, songwriter, guitarist with 3 CDs under his belt. And I'm also a musician, and I guess that's why we click. Earl Anderson is currently writing his first book, The Grey Files. Look for that book when it comes out, The Grey Files. And I'll probably mention that on my shows and future shows, so
Thank you.
And, which will be published later this year. He has 3 children, 3 grandchildren, and lives happily in Los Angeles County. I believe that's what it says. It cuts off, but Los Angeles is so big, it just cuts it off there.
That's true.
Earl
lives happily with his wife Lisa and his cat Thor. That's I think the end.
You're a cat.
You read the long biography there.
Oh yeah, I want people to get to know you, Earl. You're a great guy. You're a friendly.
Thank you.
I can see why you're a director of MUFON. You're well respected, and you know how to treat people. And that's the first key thing. And you know how to treat experiencers too, and that's a great thing. That's what I like about you, Earl Grey Anderson. Is anything else you want to add about your bio? Or
kind of covered everything, and you got, I
don't give me anything you don't want.
I was on another show yesterday, and I realized that he had my old bio. So he mentioned I had like 800 cases I'd done, and no, it's actually up to 950 MUFON cases that I've investigated over the last 8 years that I've since I joined MUFON. But everything else is pretty close to, yeah, to the mark
If you
there.
got
So
anything in writing, you don't want to read it. Be wary of that. Okay, I want to start off by saying, and this is something else that I like starting off with everybody that gets involved in this UFO topic. How and why you got your start, and when you got your start, and what got you interested. We can start off that way.
sure. Well, it's the origin story.
Yeah, right.
I'm not like Peter Parker. I didn't get bitten by a radioactive spider or anything like that.
Right.
And I guess I don't think I have any superpowers except for the intuitiveness and synchronicities that seem to follow me. But anyway, well, my story actually began. It started with my mom, and I guess I should tell you a little bit about her. Her name was Betty Grace Anderson. She was born Betty Grace Maiden. Lived in Iowa. She used to tell the first strange story that I ever heard from my mom was she called it her ball lightning story. When she was around 16 years old, she and her little sister used to sleep on the screened-in porch that they had in Iowa because it would get very, very humid, of course, in the summers. I've been to Iowa in the summer, and it's hot and humid. And
I'm in the Midwest. I can tell you that.
yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't. This is like 1930s, so there were not, or I guess early 1940s. They didn't have air conditioning and all that good stuff. So they would sleep on the porch, and it was screened in. And a lot of people do that. You still see the screened in porches out there. So, but one night she went to bed. Her little sister, my Aunt Mary, was already asleep. They had their little respective bedrolls there made up. My mom said that she had a strange buzzing sound coming from outside of where they were in behind the screen. And she looked and she said that she saw this object that was about the size between she said between the size of a basketball and a beach ball, sort of right in between there. But it was made out of sparks. She said that it sounded like a hive of angry bees. This thing was buzzing away.
Oh.
So she said that she watched this thing push its way right through the screen. It retained its shape as it did this. It sounded louder as it was coming through. And anyway, it was between her and her sister. And this thing went over and hovered over my aunt, who was totally dead to the world, asleep. So, but it hovered there as though it were observing her. And then my mom said that she had kind of gotten up on her elbows and she was staring at this thing. She wasn't asleep yet. This ball of sparks came up to where she was, and it was right in front of her. Like she said that it was, if it had had eyes, it would have been eyeball to eyeball. It was right there. And it just hovered in front of her for, a few, quite a few seconds. I think maybe 15, 20, 30 seconds or something. Then it went back, screen was pushed its way back through. She said again, it sounded like just this loud buzzing. So my mom, she got up and she ran out the door. She ran after this thing. It was just flying across this field. And she said that it went out to where their neighbor's cornfield was, and it was just hanging there, hovering, as though it were waiting for her. So she said that she got to where this ball of sparks was waiting. It was about 30, 40 feet up in the air now. And she was right under it. She's eyeballing it, looking at this thing. And it was, a few, maybe half a minute or so, and the thing popped. She said it popped like a soap bubble and was gone. But you could smell electricity in the air, ozone. Yeah. The way she described it, when I was a kid, she said it smelled like your electric train transformer.
Yeah.
And that's ozone. You know?
And
So
they,
this was some
it's,
electrical phenomenon.
I called it sulfur when I was a young kid, and I smelled this
Hmm.
ozone from this one craft, and I called it sulfur, but it's not
Hmm.
really sulfur. It's like you said, ozone. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that was like this one weird story. She always called it her ball lightning experience, but ball lightning does not go and hover over somebody and act like it's observing you. It doesn't wait for you in the middle of a field. Later on, when I heard about the Foo Fighters of World War II and all that, this was right around that time.
Right.
Uh, I thought about my mom's story, and once I knew about that phenomena, I realized, wow, my mom actually had contact when she was a 16-year-old kid. She didn't relate it to the rest of her life, though. But you'll find out the interesting stuff about the rest of her life.
Mhm.
Um, my mom went on to, she's kind of a normal teenager. I think that she was a young adult. It was a couple years later, and the police department in Muscatine, Iowa, needed somebody to just watch, to stay there and watch overnight the drunk tank and take care of because they would always have a couple of guys that they would get arrested, and so they actually deputized my mom, a girl. It was deputized to take, watch over the drunk tank.
Kind of
That was
sounds
all.
like Mayberry, Andy Griffith.
Yes. Well, it was that kind of town. I've been to Muscatine, well, I was in my 20s when I went and visited, but it was still like Mayberry back then. It had the little Maid Right. You're probably familiar with those, the crumbly hamburgers that you get in Iowa. And
Yeah.
but anyway, but she, I think that perhaps the fact that she had actually worked for law enforcement may have helped her. In when she came here and moved to California, it was back in the 1950s. My mom got a job with Howard Hughes.
I
It
wanted to
was
ask you about that, Earl.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this before on another
Mhm.
network, and I wanted to bring you back and make up for that hour that we lost. But I I wanted to ask you, do you think with Howard Hughes, he had a mysterious background? He must have had some kind of connection with some deep, dark information or intelligence or even ETs. And your mom was kind of, I guess, she was inaugurated in the ET world.
Yes,
And do you think Howard
that's what she said.
picked up on that?
Oh yeah. I've searched and searched, and I found a connection with Hughes, and that he did have an interest in this. In fact, he was friends with the contactee people that met over in Joshua Tree over at Giant Rock.
Mhm.
And they, what was the guy's name? Medker or Metzger? I forget. But he had friends with one guy. I don't. That's not the name. But the guy had like under Giant Rock, he had a bar set up, and you would go there and they would have drinks. And I'm guessing perhaps that's where Hughes was first, aware of this phenomenon. But what my mom said was that she worked as one of his two secretaries. The whole time that she worked for him, she only saw him in person once, and that was because he would leave the facility. It was the Sepulveda, the Sepulveda facility, a Hughes aircraft. And what they would do is that Howard Hughes would leave first, and then they would give them the all clear, and then everybody else could go to their cars and leave. But they screwed up once, and they gave them the all clear, and Hughes was still in the hallway. So my mom is opens the door, and she sees his silhouette standing there, and he had his suitcase or his briefcase, and he looked startled, she said. And then real quick he went out the door as fast as he could. So, I mean, it is true that the man was a germaphobe. He was, I guess, what you would call a misanthropic person, didn't like other humans very much. He liked to apparently send my mom out to do a lot of his dealings for him when there had to be face-to-face contact. At this point, he was just shut in. But she had the office next door to his, she said, and there was one other secretary that he had, and they would communicate like Charlie's Angels, the old show. They had a intercom system worked out. Anyhow, my mom did mostly stenography for him. She had to have high security clearances because he was meeting with the military. I mean, back in the 50s, this was the beginning of the military industrial complex. And then that was Hughes. He was part of all that. There was Lockheed, of course, Kelly Johnson and those guys that went out and built Area 51 over in Nevada here. That was certainly going on, but Hughes apparently was involved in this as well. So this is when I was 5 years old. Now the other stories I told you, that all the family had heard all that. Everybody knew about her seeing him at the end of the hallway and the intercom system and all that, and doing stenography. And
did she know at the time that she was actually living history with this guy?
I don't think she did. I think it was just a job for her.
Yeah.
I don't think that she intended it to be anything really, but it paid well, and it was a prestigious job for a young girl that came from the Midwest, and to California, and there you go. So, but apparently Hughes liked her. He trusted her a lot. He liked to usually hire Mormons because he felt like he could trust them, and they didn't drink, they didn't smoke. My mom didn't smoke. She just would drink minimally, she was kind of a one martini person, and that would be that. But anyway, she told this story to me when I was 5. I was in our kitchen in Venice, California, is where we were living at the time. It was a yellow paint job on the kitchen walls. It was kind of a cheerful looking room. And it was very weird the way this conversation went. She sat down next to me and she started speaking to me, but almost like I was an equal or like I was another adult. She said, "Earl, I want to tell you something that happened to me when I was working for Howard Hughes." She said, he sent me out once with a little security detail. She said, they sent me out and they didn't tell me where I was going, but it was the middle of nowhere. She said they took me out to the Great American Desert. She didn't say whether it was White Sands or Area 51 or where it was, but she just referred to it as the Great American Desert, and there was nothing there. And she said that it was the strangest thing. There was this one, all she could see was this concrete shack. It was a bunker that was there. And she was thinking, why would they take me out to look at tools or tractors or what is this about? They undid the locks and all that. It was secured building. And in that building, there was one thing, and that one thing was an elevator. There was no preamble to it. They didn't explain to her where it was going to lead. I think that maybe they were gauging her reactions and seeing if she was the right person for this sort of thing. So she said that they got into the elevator and she thought maybe it would go a floor or two. And instead it kept going, and it was going with some acceleration to where she was afraid. She said that she felt butterflies in her stomach was the term she used, vertigo, but she called it butterflies. And that when it stopped, she said the doors opened up and there was a little city. It was a bustling city under the desert. And the couple of times that she referred to this story later on in my life, that's what he's called it, the little city under the desert. I've heard other people refer to a little city under the desert. Apparently in White Sands, they referred to one.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story because we hear about all kinds of underground bunkers and cities.
This was an early one.
1953.
It was in the early 1950s. Oh. She said that they had that people were down there and they stayed down there for long periods of time. She said a lot of scientists. There were German scientists that we had acquired My mom, in different contexts, like if we were watching the Disney, Wonderful World of Disney or something, he would have Werner von Braun on explaining the staged rockets, the moon rockets and that was Werner von Braun's baby, was the staged rockets. And she would always say, "That's my friend Werner, a very charming man." And he used to call me Betty Grace. He'd put the two names together like it was like a pet name. So apparently they were close. And she always, later on, I questioned her. I said, "Wasn't he a Nazi? I mean, that's not charming, Mom." And she said, "No, he wasn't really a Nazi." She said he was forced to do what he did for Hitler. But what he used to say was, he said that we built the rockets right, but we sent them to the wrong planet. In other words, it was the V2 rockets that we were bombing. They were bombing England with, which caused all kinds of wreckage and death in Liverpool and elsewhere. So we built the rockets, but we sent them to the wrong planet. And so Mom said that he was obsessed with getting us to the moon and getting us into outer space. That was his obsession, and that's all he really thought about. And so apparently, at least according to my mom, he wasn't like a believer in Hitler's ideals or anything, thank God. But anyway, more about the underground base. But she never called it that. They call them DUMBs. That's the official name for it. Deep underground military bases.
Right, that's what they call them now. It's that name's been going on for years. There's a story that Uri Geller told me on air one time about Werner von Braun. He asked him a question about how did you feel about that V2 rocket and the rockets that you made that killed hundreds of people. And Werner von Braun told him, he said, I eliminated their pain and their agony. And he said I sent them to a better place. So he must have believed in heaven or, going somewhere else. He must have believed that was his, I guess, way of erasing the pain of killing people, that he thought, well, I'm sending them to a better place. Maybe that's just a play on.
Well, that's not a very good excuse for bombing people. Civilians. It was a weapon of terror, a terrorist, weapon.
Yeah, that's a weak.
You don't take your anger out in a war on private citizens, but that's what Germany was doing. But anyway, my mom thought he was a charming man, and he called her Betty Grace. And apparently, I'm guessing that he was one of the scientists that she met down in the little city under the desert. She said that they had a bowling alley, they had a movie theater, that they had a barber shop. She said that the barber actually could do her hair for her. And when she told me that, I thought that maybe she had visited this thing once or something, but no, if she had to have her hair done there, obviously she was spending some time down there, I got the feeling that there weren't a lot of women in this business at that point. So she probably had a lot of attention, with a bunch of guys that are stuck down underground. She said that they had cafes, and that there was one that was done up like a little French cafe that had umbrellas over the tables. And my mom, the couple of times she went back to this story, because I'd bring it up, and and she wasn't working in aerospace anymore. I think that she felt freed up a little bit to talk about it. But she said that you don't need an umbrella in a cave. And she found that it was kind of, obviously they had the little umbrellas there to make people feel comfortable and at home, a mile under the desert. And she did say that. She said that this city was a mile under the desert. Well, the first time she told me this, I was 5. And she kind of finished the conversation. And then it was almost like an addendum to the end of her telling me this. She said, "Oh, and by the way, so extraterrestrial life and UFOs are real. That's a real thing." And then that would be it. She didn't expound on that, but it was like she had to add that.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that that's what they were working on down there,
Yeah.
especially with this guy David Grush, who's come out recently, the whistleblower with the congressional Arrow hearings. He's talking about, the reverse engineering stuff, and I get the feeling that my mom was probably in the very early stages of that,
Right.
and under the ground of all places.
I just
That
wonder,
was
she mentioned it's, I wish she would have just told you more. I mean, you're
I
just
do too.
edge of your seat when you're talking.
Well, there is more, and she kind of she did. Okay, she did, but she never gave me detailed stuff. She wouldn't say they were little gray aliens, they were reptilians or what. She didn't go into that, but she was emphatic. She was speaking from experience, and that was always very clear to me and plain, the way that she presents stuff. But years went by, about 5 years actually. I was 10 years old, and my cousins and I were playing in our backyard. We were playing Lost in Space, of all things, right? We had some new toys. I think it might have been after Christmas or something. I remember having the little monster and the Lost in Space flying saucer, and we were playing with that stuff.
This must have been in the early 60s because Lost in Space come out about that.
Yeah, this was about 67. It was 1967. I would have been 9 or 10 years old. So my cousins and I heard this argument going on in the kitchen. We're in the backyard. So this was in Thousand Oaks now. We had moved to Thousand Oaks and we were living in Thousand Oaks, California. We ran up to where the screen door was, and the kitchen was over here, and the patio is here, and then the living room and the screen you go through. Mm-hmm. So we heard this arguing going on between my aunt, the same one that was hovered over by the fireball, and my mom. They're arguing in there, and we wanted to know what was going on. So we sneak up, and we're doing this number listening. And my aunt had brought over a copy of Look magazine, and the cover story was the Betty and Barney Hill story. And she was asking my mom about it. She said, "What do you think about this? Does this align with what you know?" And my mom said, yes. She said, "I think that this is, from what I know, I think that this is probably true and that this really happened." And I remember my aunt said, "Well, it's like a bad science fiction film." She said, "For God's sake, the woman says that they stuck a needle in her navel." And I'll never forget this because, I was a little kid, and I didn't know what a navel was. And my older cousin, I'm going, "What's a navel?" And he's going, "It's a belly button, stupid." No, shut up, And so here they are, they're talking about this crazy stuff. And, my mom said, "No, I think that this really, from what I know, this is in accord with what I know." And I don't know if my aunt believed her. I think that she didn't want to think this was true. My mom never knew that we heard them have this conversation. I remember standing out there in the backyard, and I just kind of got the willies for the first time. I felt sweaty and sort of like, the goose flesh thing. And the universe seemed like it was coming in on me, because I always thought, I thought of ETs in the abstract, the great Gazoo from the Flintstones, or My Favorite Martian, or, stuff like that. And suddenly, it's this personal that had interaction with humans and took them and did experiments and stuff with them. And that was completely out of my realm. You didn't hear abduction stories. There weren't UFO shows on TV back then. And I just remember something clicked and changed within me. And I'll say, all my life, I felt like this propensity for this connection with outer space. Like, want to grow up and be an astronaut. I'd be climbing up on the swing set and singing and waving at the sky, and Mom is going, "Who are you waving and singing at?" And it's like the space people. I'm waving and singing to the space people. That was before she had her conversation with me. So
Yeah, you and I, we it sound like we had the same obsession because I always like these
Yes.
movies, these sci-fi movies.
Hmm.
The world stood still, and
Hmm.
the attack of the Martians.
But I didn't see a whole
Yeah.
lot of those. You know, I mean, Santa Claus and the Martians, my parents thought that that was going to be too scary for me to go. I wanted to see that movie, I remember, Santa Claus versus the Martians. They wouldn't let me go to see that in the theater. They thought it would give me nightmares. So it came from somewhere other than the television, or you know, it just seemed to be born in me, this connection. And maybe it's because she was pregnant with me when she was working in this deep underground military base.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if they had an ET there, but my mom sure spoke with authority. I mean, later on, well, I'll get to that. I don't want to lose the train here. Uh, so, anyway, the next year I was in fourth grade. I was 10 years old, and I started reading UFO books in the school library. They had four of them. They had Kehoe's book, they had Hynek's first book. I think that they might have had, I think they had the Kenneth Arnold Flying Saucer book.
Yeah.
And then there was some, I think one of the contactee books, perhaps. But I kind of started becoming obsessed with that because of hearing my mom and what she was talking about with my aunt, and I wanted to know more. Well, we had one day at school where it was show and tell. What do your parents do? Most of the kids, of course, moms were stay-at-home moms back then in the 60s, but some of, you know, is like, tell us about your family. So I talked about my dad's business, and it wasn't a whole lot to talk about. My dad was a landscape contractor, and sometimes I'd help help roll sod and stuff. And so I mentioned that, and then the spirit hit me, I guess. I told them, I said, but you know what my mom used to do? She worked for Howard Hughes, and mom told me she worked in this little city that was under the desert.
Mm.
And I told the story. It was the first time I ever told that story to the class. And I I gave them the good ending there, you know. I said, "Oh no," and then she also said that UFOs are real, and that the government knows this already. That they're not telling people that UFOs and aliens are real. I forget if I think I used the word alien, Martian something, you know,
Yeah,
little
we
kids.
never used extraterrestrial back then.
No, we didn't.
It was alien or,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, monster, alien, or
Yeah.
from outer space, you know, whatever.
Well, anyway, I became the butt of kids' jokes. I mean, they started teasing me from then on, you know, here's weird Earl, tell us about UFOs, Earl, you know, and then, you know, and I guess my teacher, she saw a problem there. And so she called my mom in for a parent teacher conference. So I'm out in the play yard, and the other kids weren't having parent teacher conferences. This was a special one that they set up. In fact, what's weird is that it wasn't even my homeroom teacher that did this. It was the teacher from the class next door that initiated this conference. But she was concerned about what was going on. And I think she's concerned about the teasing and concerned about what I told the class. And apparently the teachers were talking about this. So anyway, my mom came out. She was pretty quiet. We walked out to the car. I didn't think anything was wrong. And she's driving me home, and she looks at me and she says, "You know, son, I'm not mad at you because you didn't know that there was anything wrong with what you did. I never told you that you," she said, "I never told you that you couldn't talk about the little city under the desert or UFOs." And she's going back to driving. And then she turns around again. She said, "How did you remember? You were just a baby when I told you." She said, the only reason why I told you is because I thought you'd forget. You're just a baby." And then she was really visibly upset, and I'm getting visibly upset. You know, I mean, you know, you didn't want to get my mom mad. She did have a little temper to her. Like, it could be
Well,
a
yeah,
big
well, she
temper at
was a
times.
pretty smart woman. I mean, you know,
Yes. Well, I think she was miserable and bored being a housewife too. She didn't like it.
Right.
She had an exciting life before, and suddenly, she's like trying to, bake casseroles and stuff. And we used to call them her burnt offerings. I'm sorry, Mom. She wasn't the best. She could make a good meatloaf. All right.
Mhm.
But anyway, so my mom then said, you can't ever talk about this again, for God's sake. And you certainly can't ever talk about this in front of your class. She said, no, I have to tell you, I had to tell your teacher that you have a big imagination, and that I didn't know that you just made that up. She said, and I know you didn't, and that you were being honest, but if you talk about this, your mother could get into terrible trouble. And she said, waited like a pause. And then she said, your mother could go to prison if you talk about this. People don't know about UFOs, and they don't know about little cities under the desert, and they're supposed to know.
So that kind of scared her. So that
Yeah.
actually that actually revealed her real true self from her fear that she had. When I saw my UFOs, I told my classmates and they just laughed at me like you said.
Yeah.
I told my mom and she told me, don't talk about UFO or flying saucer. It was flying saucer back then. She said,
Mhm.
don't talk about the flying saucer. And I said, well, we saw it. She said, well, you might have seen it, but don't talk about it. She said, people think you're crazy.
Mm.
And so I quit talking about it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, I did too. I stopped talking about it. I mean, I went back to the school library and they had taken the books out. The books were gone. They banned the books. I mean, they, so don't ban books, you guys. That's not good. I mean, I wanted to understand about UFOs. And I think that I eventually, uh, found some at the regular library, but I didn't get there all the time, But anyway, years went by, and my mom, she started working at she opened up her own manpower employment office. But the thing that was weird was that, because I'd go over there after high school some days and kind of hang out, right? Uh, I noticed that every single account she had was some aerospace company. It would be Northrop, Lockheed. She'd be talking about Skunk Works. Rockwell International was one of her clients. Raytheon was a client. I mean, it was just like the whole panoply of various and sundry, the military industrial complex. That was who my mom, again, was like serving. Later on, she actually said that she was like a headhunter, a corporate headhunter for aerospace. That was back in the 1990s, where she passed away. Um, but anyhow, um, I took my mom to see Star Wars when it came out. Another thing I found out about people that worked in these deep underground bases, many of them repeatedly got cancers. Like being irradiated was a thing. Maybe that was because it was near the Trinity site where they dropped bomb and they were doing all those experiments. I mean, that certainly was a thing in that area. Um, or maybe it was something about, I mean, they had to power this deep underground base somehow. I'm sure that obviously it was off of the grid, I mean, she called it a little city, you know. So, but anyhow, she had cancer 6 different times. Last time it got her, but back 1977, she had a scare, and I went with her as support to her doctor, and she came up with a clean bill of health. Thank God. So we celebrated by going out for lunch and then seeing this new movie called Star Wars. And we watched Star Wars, and the curtains closed. And guess what? My mom did her second big disclosure number. She started talking again. And your audio is gone. Uh-oh. Are you muted? It shows that you're muted. The mute button was on. I could see it right there. Go push unmute. You see on the left hand side of your screen, it's got the mute thing. Yeah, I don't see it now. you edit they edit these anyway, right? What I would say is what you should maybe do is just unplug your microphone and plug it back in or something and see if maybe something happened there. At first, it showed the little red line through the mute box on your name, and so it was muted there. But now I don't see that. Ooh. Well, shoot. I don't know what to do there. Yeah, I would see. Yeah, you think so? Could be. Unfortunate. That is really unfortunate because that was going really good. I get a detailed version. I want to repeat, you know. Crud. What should we do? You want to close out and try again, or did you try unplugging your mic and plugging it in again? And did you accidentally hit? Do you have like a little mute button on your microphone itself? Because I got that on this guy. Oh well, it's on the computer. Yeah, they may be messing with us. It's not the first time this has happened to me. And like it happened Zoom once before. So, well, do you want to close this up, save this? Maybe can you edit this together with another if we go back on? Or what you could why don't you sign out and then log back in and I'll stay here and see if that works. You want to try that? Give it a shot.